I'm going to get some people on. Check 1 2, check 1 2.
Brothers and sisters, it's plain to see what this world is coming to. But it's time now, time for me, time for you. Wake up, get up from your spiritual grave. Let the light in you shine through, come on.
Assalamu alaikum and peace be unto you. Welcome to the SOS Saving Ourselves live stream program. By uniting amongst ourselves and accepting the responsibility to build our communities, Saving Ourselves is presented by the Holly Springs, Mississippi Study Group, located, of course, in Holly Springs, Mississippi. I am your host, Brother Abdul Shaheed Muhammad, and for today's program, we got something exciting for you. The topic of today's talk will be the Farrakhan effect, hurling truth at falsehood, with our special guest, student minister Demetri Muhammad. And we will get started in a very, very few moments. Welcome back to SOS Live. Assalamu alaikum everyone, peace be unto you. Once again, welcome to the SOS radio program. Again, I am your host, Brother Abdul Shaheed Muhammad, and we are certainly excited to be back broadcasting live. As you can see, I'm solo right now. My colleague and co-host, Brother Kenneth X, had some last minute family business, of course, to take of some nothing of an emergency. Nothing no trouble, just some things my brother had to do, and I certainly anticipate his return back by our side here at the SOS radio program. As always, we like to begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I bear witness to the oneness of God, regardless the land label or language one would choose to apply. We bear witness to the oneness of God. We don't argue over the names by which God is known or remembered, because as mature people of faith, we should know and understand that God is known according to the language and culture of the people amongst whom he raised his prophets, messengers, and warners. We also bear witness to the oneness of his prophets and to the oneness of the messages that were revealed through them to the human family. And please allow me to greet you, the greeting words of peace in the Semitic language of all of the prophets. We say it, Assalamu alaikum. Those words simply mean, may peace be unto you. As a matter of fact, Jesus said it the same way. You will find it in biblical scripture, where you hear Jesus saying, and the disciples, peace be unto you. So it is in that spirit that we greet you, and glad to be back as the SOS radio ministry coming out of Holly Springs, Mississippi. And it's certainly our prayer that we will say something to benefit those who tune in and listen, say something to benefit your spiritual growth and development, and to serve as guidance in a very, very troubling time in which we are now living. I'm reminded of something the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said to us, that the most valuable possession that you can have, particularly in this time, is right guidance. So it is certainly our prayer that we give information that can help determine a true course of rectitude, and one that is best and that is pleasing to Almighty God. I got a lot of, as you can see, I'm in my studio. This is where I do my recording of my music. I'm here in my studio, and I'm anticipating in about 10 minutes or so the arrival of our guest student minister, Dimitri Muhammad. And before he gets here, and we here at the SOS radio program, not radio program, it's live stream now. I'm so used to being on the radio. We had our radio ministry in Holly Springs, Mississippi, North Mississippi. So we are transitioning, to the various platforms that you see people use, and Zoom is certainly one of them, and live streaming via Facebook. So before we begin, I'd like to begin with what I call axioms or guiding principles to undergird the conversation. Those that may be tuning in and those that have already tuned in, let me thank you for choosing to spend time with us today. I see my sister Patsy is on, and there are others. Sister Patsy has commented, and I see people are coming on here. So thank you all for tuning in, and it's certainly again our prayer that we say something of benefit to all of you today. Once again, let me start with some guiding principles that I would like for us to consider as we engage in this, what I estimate is an important conversation regarding the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as a student and striving to be a good student and good helper of his in a cause that I see as much, much bigger than myself, and a worthy cause to which to dedicate my time, energy, and life, if you will, for the upliftment of not only my people, but to the whole of humanity, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would say. So let's get at it. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan said to us, and these are one of the principles that I like to use to keep in mind as we have these discussions. He said to us, "He who prescribes the diameter of your knowledge dictates the circumference of your activity." And as we know, historically speaking, the diameter of our knowledge has been prescribed by the same people who gave us the diameter of knowledge that caused us to see ourselves as less than human, to see ourselves as second class, to see ourselves as not quite measuring up or meeting the mark. So we need to be careful of whose prescription, a diameter of prescription of knowledge that we accept. And the diameter of knowledge that has been prescribed to us here in the Nation of Islam, as I see and have benefited from, is a diameter of knowledge that will allow you to go as high as the gifts that Almighty God has given you, if we take advantage of the knowledge and develop and nurture those gifts to the height to which they can reach. The second axiom we like to use is also from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, wherein he writes, a slave. He defines it as a slave is one whose power and authority is ruled over by another, and whose sphere of freedom is limited according to the wishes of his master. Now that's an interesting definition as we look at current events, as those who want to dictate the sphere of freedom of those of us, particularly in our entertainment community and us as a community. They want to exert power and authority over us and limit our sphere of freedom according to their wishes. That's axiom number 2. Third one I'd like to give to us is from our brother Carter G. Woodson in his great work, The Miseducation of the Negro. He wrote these words. He said, quote, "When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to go here or yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not have to tell him to go to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there's not a back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary." So those are the 3 axioms. I got one more, but let me check and make sure my brother has not tuned in here. No, he hasn't arrived yet. I got to make sure my screens, this technology, there's a learning curve to it, and hopefully things are going off quite smoothly so far to the listening audience. And send some shout outs. I see my brothers and sisters are on. Sister Khadija Al-Quran is on. Brother Robert is on. Sister Clarion, thank you on. My brother Hoyle, the ever supportive Brother Hoyle is on. Thank all of you so much. Brother Joseph is on. Yes, we're going to give shout outs to those who take time out to join us here at the SOS live stream, Saving Ourselves. So those are the axioms, and there's another axiom or guiding principle that we would like for us to consider. Dr. King, in his response to the crisis in American cities as the riots broke out during that civil rights era, he quoted a man by the name of Victor Hugo. And that quote reads as follows, and I'm going from memory because I thought about it and I didn't have it here in front of me. But according to Dr. King, Victor Hugo wrote, "When the soul is left in darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sin, but he who causes the darkness." Now, for every physical reality, there's a spiritual counterpart. So the context of this quote is talking about in the spiritual sense, where there is the absence of information or the withholding or withdrawal of right guidance and accurate information. So when the soul is not properly informed, then the people are left in a condition and in a circumstance where they are likely to commit sin. What it is the duty and the responsibility of a civilized nation to educate its citizens. In fact, a democracy, as they define it, saying the rule of the people, well, if a democracy, as the definition says, is the rule of the people, it doesn't say what people, but the rule of the people, then that presupposes that the people who rule must be enlightened, because you cannot rule in darkness or ignorance. So that quote is certainly applicable today. And we're going to go forward in today's program, and I am waiting with bated breath for my guest. I have a stack of his writings. He's an author, a well-spoken brother. He is, and I'll probably be saying this again once he comes on, he is on the research team of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and I have several of his titles with me, some that he authored himself, some collection of the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He has preserved and put in book form the many articles written by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the Pittsburgh Courier, which are the seminal fluid, spiritually speaking, of the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So as we wait for my brother, we'll just hold up a few. My brother compiled the work and writings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and there is a second volume to this, and it is certainly a source of divine, in my estimation, revelation from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a second work that my brother wrote, and this is quite relevant where I am concerned, How to Police the Black Community, by student minister Dimitri Muhammad. You can go to his website, researchminister.com. And one of my favorites that I like to use in ministry in the light of scripture, scriptural references that are made relevant to the time in which we live. And these were taken from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and they were compiled by not just student minister Dimitri Muhammad, but my brother and colleague also, student minister Rashad Muhammad, who helped him. You see their pictures there on the back. And God willing, or as we say in Islam or as Muslims, inshallah, we will have our brother student minister Rashad as a guest on the SOS radio program. Actually, I got to get out of saying that. Not SOS radio program, but the SOS Saving Ourselves live stream on Facebook Live. Here's another work of our brother student minister Dimitri Muhammad. Who do they say I am? The Vindication of Minister Louis Farrakhan. In this book is elected officials, celebrities, religious leaders, journalists, and scholars bear witness to the character, impact, and value of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And this comes from an array of people, ethnically, professionally, and across the board. So this one is quite interesting and relevant to today's conversation. And I have one other one that I think I will hold until my brother makes his way onto today's live stream, if you will. So there you have it. That's some of the work of my brother. See, I'm checking. I say, when you can see what you're doing. So I'm so accustomed to being in a studio of a radio station where you just have the mic and then you have someone at the control board. They're running everything. And all I have to do is sit and speak into the mic. Well, this is quite different in the sense that I have to orchestrate and navigate a lot of different things and multitask. And as I'm seeing, see, I'm looking at my phone, that's why I'm looking down, and it looks as though things are going off quite well. Let me give some shout outs, people that are coming on. Man, thank you all so much. My brother Eric Muhammad, brother Eric, all the way in Texas. Assalamu alaikum, Chief. Give brother Elijah the greetings, please, and your family. And my brother Robert is on. Of course, Sister Connie is on. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm just waiting on my brother and friend, Student Minister Dimitri Muhammad. I don't want to give away a lot of what we're going to discuss because his perspective on these things. And of course, the Farrakhan effect. And let me go ahead and broach the subject, hurling the truth at falsehood. As many of you know, the recent message delivered by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on July 4th, that was last month, July 4th, entitled The Criterion. And in the wake of that message, the delivery of that message, of course, there was a lot of, I wouldn't call it backlash, I would call it squirming and a lot of rage, as I have heard it characterized. Made a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but a particular group among the community of the Jewish people angry at what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had to say of the truth. And as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said to us, we need to hurl the truth at falsehood. And it looks as though my brother has arrived, and we want to welcome him immediately. And let's see that there he is. As I see a little background there. He will probably come into view momentarily. There he is. He's kind of sideways. It's like, there he is. Okay. Let me see if I can situate this thing where, there we go. Now that's better. There's my brother and friend. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sir.
What's going on, my brother Dimitri?
Hey, brother, Student Minister Abdul Shahid Muhammad. It's a great pleasure and honor to get to see you, brother, after a long period of time.
Yes, sir. I should say student minister and scholar, but I affectionately still call him, when I get the opportunity, the beautiful Dimitri. And that goes way back, brother. That just to me characterizes the spirit, or your spirit, as I have known you most of my Islamic life, having been a registered member of the Nation of Islam since 1993, and just thankful still to be on Sirat al-Mustaqim, or the straight path, as we say, and honored to have you, my brother, and honored to be in that unique fraternity, if you will, of students in the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So, Brother Dimitri, man, I've been on here. I got a stack of your work that I have introduced the audience to let them know the caliber of brother, which I'm sure many of those who are listening now are familiar with. And I gave our audience some undergirding principles that I wanted them to consider as we go forward in this conversation. As you may see, my brother Kenneth, he had some things that he needed to tend to. No emergency. He just had to take care of some things. And he told me he will be back with me at the next broadcast. But brother, introduce yourself. I know you've done it a lot of times. But this particular audience, the SOS Saving Ourselves live stream audience, we are seated in North Mississippi in Holly Springs. Introduce yourself, and you're no stranger to Mississippi, brother. Go right ahead.
Hey, brother, I like to always begin with great expressions of gratitude and thanksgiving to Almighty God, Allah,
who appeared to us in the person of the great Mahdi, Master Fard Muhammad. And I could never thank him enough for raising from amongst black people in America a bold man, a powerful man, a humble man, a meek man,
Yes, sir.
yet a man whose powerful message has struck fear in the hearts of the rulers of the earth. He came from the outskirts of Sandersville, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Again, we're speaking to those in Mississippi tonight, but if you remove the imaginary boundary lines between Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia,
Come on, man.
you just end up with the Deep South, a place historically that has been a place of great suffering for our people. And I'm thankful to Allah that He chose a man from the South
Yes, sir.
to be a divine leader, teacher, and guide for us. And we are getting to know him as the messenger Messiah that the scriptures preach of. And I'm certainly thankful, and I wouldn't know anything about the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad were it not for his principal helper and his greatest student,
Yes,
the
sir.
Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I'm just very happy, to be on here with my brother and to be able to speak to an audience of those that come from and are living in the state that I was born and grew up in, the great state of Mississippi, as we talk about a man that I consider to be my teacher, a man whom I believe and am growing in my understanding of him as a modern manifestation of Jesus, a man who was walking in the footsteps right before our very eyes of the great prophets of old. And so, whenever we can have an occasion to talk about Minister Farrakhan, I feel that I belong in that conversation.
Yes, sir.
So I'm very grateful and privileged tonight to be able to engage with you, Brother Shaheed, and the listening audience.
Praise is due to Allah. You see this big grin on my face, brother. I'm just simply ecstatic to have this opportunity, brother, and this platform to use in a most positive way. And hopefully, God willing, inshallah, as we say, as I've already stated and I restate, that we will say something of benefit that will benefit our people and our listeners in their spiritual growth and development, and more specifically to serve as guidance in what is in truth a really, really dark time. As you heard me say earlier, I mentioned all of the books my brother has written. Make sure you go to researchminister.com, and I saved one on purpose, which is his most recent work. This particular book is a must-have for those who would want to know from our perspective, but didn't you kill Malcolm? As many of you may or may not know, but many do know, the controversy surrounding the assassination of Malcolm X has oftentimes been weaponized and used against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And they have historically controlled that narrative. But thanks to Allah and brothers like you, Brother Student Minister Dimitri, we are recapturing that narrative and giving a perspective from which and a prism through which the people can look at this and get our view and our side, okay, and our perception. So, brother, let's get at it. The Farrakhan effect. As all of us know, and that effect has been a sustained one over 40 plus years since the second rise of the Nation of Islam. And brother, I want you to, if you would, as you see it, the overall effect of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And I asked this question, what is the overall effect? I asked this question because the enemies of the rise of our people have perfected the art of causing the great work and accomplishments of our great ones and organizations to, quickly fade in the consciousness of black people. And one of the tactics that they use is they make sure they cover them up and keep them out of the public sphere. So, brother, what has been the overall effect of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam on black America and America in general as you see it?
Well, Brother Shaheed, I would have to conclude, as I think you would agree, that the overall effect of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the rebuilt Nation of Islam has been extremely beneficial. In fact, if we just look at recent history, we have to draw the conclusion, as many have, that for the past 40 plus years, maybe around the last 43 to 45 years. Minister Farrakhan, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, has been the premier leader of Black America. And he has so profoundly touched the lives of millions of individual brothers and sisters, but he has also existed as a thorn in the side of the white power structure, primarily because Minister Farrakhan's work might be characterized as what the scriptures call when they describe the watchman on the wall. And so because Minister Farrakhan's bold and prophetic ministry frequently interferes with the genocidal plans of the white power structure, he is viewed as persona non grata in many circles or echelons of power. But yet, like Jesus, he remains a man that the poor hear and receive with gladness. And so the Farrakhan effect, or the Farrakhan phenomenon, is rather peculiar and intriguing all at the same time, because we see the stark contrast of a man who, you know, plays classical music on a very high level. And he is personally so tender, meek, and mild, like the old church folk used to sing about Jesus in the country churches that I grew up in and around. But when you see him before the ears of our oppressors and adversaries, he's speaking a truth to power that makes them very uncomfortable and makes them frightened. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has literally been a David amongst black people in America, who has spoken out against the Goliaths in our life. And as David was in the scriptures, a stringed instrument player, as David was a young, compassionate man who cared for the sheep and the lambs of his father's house, as David was a man that when the people feared who would challenge the great giant Goliath, David stepped forth, and with 5 smooth stones, and he only needed one.
That's right.
He was able to destroy Goliath, and then he proceeded forth to take the honors of taking Goliath's own sword and taking Goliath's head off. This is the work of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan among black people in America in the modern age, as he goes up against the white power structure, the Gentile white power structure, and of course, the Jewish power structure. So I could never thank Allah enough that he has blessed us to be sharers of time and space with such a magnificent and anointed servant of his. And then it is just an extra blessing to believe in him and to be one chosen, I believe, to serve him and to help him in his divine work.
Praise be to Allah. Excellent. Thank you, dear brother. Now, if I were to try to bring all that you said and encapsulate it into one word, that word would be friend. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been the truest, most devoted, and dutiful and faithful friend of Black America, and I would say humanity, because he has unabashedly and consistently spoken the truth that has freed many of us, not just black people, but many throughout the spectrum. Caucasians have expressed and have verbalized how they have been liberated in ways from the message and ministry of the ministry. And I say friend because the next thing I wanted to get at, my brother, you know, many and some, particularly members of the Jewish community, have proclaimed to be our friend, you know. And they acknowledge that for generations, these friends of ours, particularly members, and I emphasize members of the Jewish community in certain Jewish organizations, they have said to be and presented themselves as our friend. And they acknowledge that for generations that our community overall has been and continues to be in social, economic, and political crisis. You know, and it's a condition that the scriptures, of course, call spiritual death. Now, America has touted hard work, self-help, self-determination, and community responsibility are the pathways, or is the pathway out of this condition that we're in. Now, self-help and self-improvement is a very prominent and important component to the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, and that is well known. But here's the problem. When men like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and some before him, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, when they pursue self-determination, self-help, community responsibility, when they do it, they get opposition from those who say that they are a friend. Now, why is that? And I think, you know, and I'm sure you will contextualize it, because it's one thing to say and present yourself as our friend. And then when someone comes and demonstrates that on the level that we see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and saw the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey and others, Noble Drew Ali, demonstrate that friendship, members of the Jewish community have a problem with that. How do you meld those two together?
Well, by and large, the Jewish leadership and Jewish political organizations have not been a true friend of the black community. You know, in the life of Jesus, he was opposed by the Roman government and he was opposed by the Jewish leadership, specifically a trio of groups that the Bible refers to as the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the scribes. In the modern context, Minister Farrakhan has been opposed by the American government. Once upon a time, the U.S. Senate censored Minister Farrakhan in a 95-0 vote. The Nation of Islam has had to withstand espionage activities and the interference of the federal government into our religious practice and service. But in the modern context also, you have groups like the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, who are like the modern Pharisees, Sadducees, and the scribes, who dogged the trail of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, because Minister Farrakhan's ministry and message is the message of his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And when you go back into the history of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, even to the founder of the Nation of Islam, Allah, in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, we find episodes where members of the Jewish community were interfering with our work of reform. It is a salvific work. It is a restorative work among black people, taking the masses of black people from the clutches of those who have exploited us, those who have oppressed us, and many of whom have advised us toward the path of seeking a solution to our problem that they knew would never effectuate a real solution to our problem. And so we witness a certain kind of pernicious Jewish paternalism where the black community is concerned. And they have taken it upon themselves to have this peculiar interest in our affairs, so much so that anytime a leader emerges from our ranks and his message does not agree with the path that they have chosen for us, he is falsely labeled as an anti-Semite. Many times and frequently he is referred to as a black Hitler, and his movement is set upon. And the levels of Jewish power are brought to bear upon his movement, such that the effect is the sabotaging of his movement that is purpose for the good of all of our people. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan does not conceive of himself as just the leader of the Muslims of the Nation of Islam.
That's correct.
His teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, told him, brother, I want you to speak for the whole of our people. I want you to think and plan for the whole of our people. And if we look at Minister Farrakhan's history, which I encourage us to do, you'll find a man that has always expressed a sincere concern about all of our people, whether you agree with him or not, whether you believe in Islam or not. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been our friend, and because, to go back to your first question, because of his beneficial impact on our people, it is this the real reason why Minister Farrakhan is feared, hated, and loathed. And so we now are learning more of the opposition of these organizations to black leadership, where they have opposed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they opposed the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, they opposed and condemned Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and the list goes on and on. So Minister Farrakhan now is beginning to expose Jewish misconduct in the black community, and they have taken issue with it. And instead of acknowledging the truth of the minister, they have chosen to slander the minister, scandalize his name, and to institute economic sanctions against the Nation of Islam, and to also institute a blockade against the message of the Nation of Islam in popular platforms like social media. So we are now on a warrior's footing with respect to any who are seeking to rob the black community of not only adequate leadership, but the divine leadership that we bear witness is found in the person and message of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you for that, brother. And as you mentioned those names, I have a short list, and Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois was amongst those names. Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Gandhi, Michael Jackson, Oprah Winfrey. So, and I glanced at my bookshelf and at my books, and because the Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, volumes 1, 2, and 3 came to mind, which I have. I had intended to have them here to use as a visual, but mentioning them is sufficient. And this takes me to this relationship that I don't think many of us understand, that the Jewish community have with us. And I say that they have with us because we don't necessarily have it with them. They have taken it upon themselves, as you say, to take a very paternalistic posture where the black community is concerned. And if you understand that kind of relationship, the child does not have much of a choice as a mother. But if it's a good mother or a good parent, that's one thing. But if it's not, that's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother situation. Now, as I was saying, most of us don't really know of the relationship between the black and Jewish communities, and those that do they really don't understand it. I'll say it like that. And I'm reading from my notes here, brother. So only a select few black people, as we now see it and understand it, enjoy quote unquote success on a level where they are nationally known or renowned, or their notoriety goes beyond the borders of the United States. But that success is strictly on the terms of those who are the real architects of that success. And the reason I say it like that is because wherever you find prominent blacks that are successful in music and whatever field of endeavor you choose, most of them are under Jewish control and have Jewish backing. Okay? Now, successful black people are not free to befriend, support, associate with, or even be in the same room with whomever they choose. What is it about the ADL, SPLC, the Simon Wiesenthal Center that deemed this to be inappropriate and unsuitable? Speak to us in the context of why this is the way it is now. Because one thing I like about you, Brother Dimitri, you give context, historical context, to the relationship. So if you would, brother, for our audience, what is it about our celebrities that they don't have this freedom?
Well, you raise a very powerful point, Brother Student Minister Shaheed, because, you know, it's fascinating to reflect upon the fact that, you know, in the black community, we never raise our hand to object to whomever the Jewish community chooses to be their leaders or their spokespersons, or who they choose to be allied with, you know. And so they, on the flip side of it, they're always meddling in who we have chosen to listen to, chosen to befriend, and chosen to follow. And if, as it is in the case of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, black brothers and sisters of means and substance, and we have a broad audience of following, begin to identify with Minister Farrakhan, admire him, and to showcase their love for him before the broad and the large audiences that they have, they end up being punished by these organizations. Certainly now we see how our brother Nick Cannon, he lost his relationship and his company, wilding out, because Viacom did not like statements that he made regarding the history of the Caucasian people and certain comments about the Jewish community. And because of statements, our brother potentially loses control of $1 billion brand. And so what I have tried to help audiences understand is that this phenomenon began, or what happened to Nick Cannon, what's taking place with Deshaun Jackson, what's taking place with Steven Jackson, Madonna, Chelsea Handler, Busta Rhymes. These are the A-list celebrities who have discovered Minister Farrakhan's ministry and chosen to highlight it before their fans and followers in social media. And Jewish leaders and organizations have pounced on them, making them and insisting that they apologize, that they repudiate Minister Farrakhan, etc. And 2 points I'd like to make regarding this. First of all, this began in 1994. A report authored by the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, which is entitled Mainstreaming Anti-Semitism, the Legitimation of Louis Farrakhan, included policy recommendations regarding the growing popularity of the minister. See, this was during a time period where, Brother Shaheed, they were having also in 1993 the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington. And in the 80s and 90s, you know, the most popular speaker in Black America was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
That's right.
So, you know, it's a wise move to invite him and to see if you can secure his presence at your event, because that would ensure that you would have a large number of people to put your message in front of.
Yes,
so
sir.
the major civil rights leaders, they invited Minister Farrakhan to speak in 1993. And many people would not believe it, but very erudite and legendary brothers and sisters that we in the black community look up to, they literally were treated as children by Rabbi David Saperstein.
Yes, sir.
Because when Coretta Scott King and the Reverend Joseph Lowry and others invited their brother, which they have a right to do. You know, if we are free,
come on, man,
we have a right to pick and choose whomever we want as our leader and whomever we want to listen to. But to show that we are not free in the eyes of these Jewish organizations, Rabbi David Saperstein chastised grown men and women who are leaders in their own right, and he wrote them a letter saying, "You did not get our permission to invite Louis Farrakhan."
Wow. Brother, I remember that. It is. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And in 1994, the ADL put together this report. And there it was when they said that we can't stop Farrakhan. We know he's filling a void in the black community. Black community is suffering, and Farrakhan in the nation fills the void. These are things they said in their report. But yet, even though they acknowledge, as you asked the first question, the impact of the minister,
Yes.
they acknowledge his beneficial impact
Mhm.
on black people.
Mhm.
They still determined to oppose him and to destroy him.
Wow.
But they wisely concluded, as the old saying goes, Brother Shaheed, their arms are too short to box with God.
Mhm.
So they wisely concluded, hey, we can't stop Farrakhan. But what we are going to do, we're going to impose an obligation,
Come
that's
on now.
coded language, on any who give to Farrakhan a platform, as colleges, universities, organizations, celebrities, musicians, etc. So fast forward to 2020. Nick Cannon is being punished because that was a decision made back in 1994 by the ADL leadership that they were going to impose an obligation. In other words, like when the Godfather said, we're going to make him an offer he can't refuse. So now through threats and intimidation, that they will ruin the careers of these powerful, or I should say influential and popular celebrities. They forced them to apologize to the Jewish community, and they forced them to, in many cases, repudiate Minister Farrakhan. And this is why, personally, I'm very proud of our brother Nick Cannon, because despite his efforts to strengthen his relationship with the Jewish community in Hollywood and around the country, he has refused up to this point to repudiate Minister Farrakhan, and it appears that this is the holy grail that they're really pursuing. He talked to Rabbi Abraham Cooper, and Rabbi Cooper couldn't make him repudiate the minister. He just talked to some other rabbi the other day, and he couldn't make him repudiate the minister. And so I'm proud of that young man.
Yes, sir.
And I'm praying for him and his family that they will continue to be successful and be protected by Allah. The second point that I wanted to bring up is that when we talk about the relationship between the black community and the Jewish community,
Yes, sir.
we're talking about a relationship that has been previously hidden and that it is now being uncovered. And so as it is being uncovered, you know, it's kind of like, you know, that old blues singer, and I forget his name, but he had a song, and the song was called Everything's Out in the Open. And so
Yes,
now
sir.
that so much of this, Brother Shaheed, is out in the open, people are scrambling to cover up these secrets. But you have to appreciate that what Minister Farrakhan has published, 3 volumes, soon to be 4 volumes, of the secret relationship between blacks and Jews, is essentially a compilation of the statements, the documents, the quotations from Jewish scholars, rabbis, and historians who have published their own people's misconduct with respect to the black community. In other words, black suffering in America has been our own unique Holocaust experience. And through the study of history, we have found that many Jews participated in the black Holocaust.
Yes, sir.
Not all of them, but many of them did. And because the minister has exposed this, instead of them apologizing and being contrite and making an atonement to the black community, they have chosen to oppose and to destroy Minister Farrakhan for essentially doing nothing more than reading their textbooks, reading their sacred books,
Wow.
and saying, hey, listen, I see you all wrote this about what y'all did to us. What are you going to do about it? And so that is where we are right now. And we are prayerful that as time goes on, the message of Minister Farrakhan can have the widest and broadest of audiences so that the truth can be made known to the public. And then after the truth is made known, then people can decide which side they're on.
Yes, sir. I would, and I like to say this to those who are listening, and certainly thank you all. Man, it's a good number of listeners on, Brother Dimitri. Thank every last one of you for taking time out of your day to tune in to our live stream here today. And certainly we are definitely excited to be back. But I would encourage us to pump the brakes, so to speak, where Brother Nick Cannon and others are concerned, because their reality is quite different from our own. And I'll leave that right there, because I too am proud, because, I mean, we know, brother, back in the 90s, I mean, they would have our leadership back up and double down on the backup, and
Yes.
come full circle and repudiate. So that's a sign that their power and ability, where that is concerned, is waning. So, brother, next, and I have 7 bullet points here. I hope we get through them all,
Sure.
particularly the last one. Also, in the wake of the minister's message on July 4th, which I strongly encourage brothers and sisters, go and listen to that message. Go and listen. But also in the wake, they have lifted their pens, particularly Mr. Dershowitz, and they have gone to their microphones. I saw an interview, a part of an interview, I didn't watch the entirety of it, of Live TV with D.L. Hughley. I think that was around just a few days after the minister spoke. And listening, I read Mr. Dershowitz's article and some of the legal things that he quoted. And I thought about a conversation you and I had a while back, and a lecture that you did. I think you broached this. And I want to ask you the question on this platform. Do you think that there is an attempt, or will be an attempt made, to make telling specific truths that expose Jewish misconduct and inordinate influence over black life in America and in the public sphere and even in government? Do you think there's a move for them to make exposing them illegal, or telling the truth about them illegal?
I do believe that, Brother Shahid, because each and every day we are witnessing the erosion of that which has heretofore been a constitutional right of the First Amendment, the freedom, the right to freedom of speech, the freedom of expression. But as the days go by, it appears that only certain forms of expression you can make freely. If you are courageous enough and bold enough to speak unpopular truths, uncomfortable truths, those kind of truths that the scholars refer to Jesus as having uttered as hard sayings, then you have to pay a great price. And so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the YouTube, all of the major social media platforms have been removing content that is critical of the Jewish leadership. And this is problematic because, again, it really is a violation of the constitutional rights of freedom of speech. It reminds me of what I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say once. I believe it may have been in 1996 or 1997 in the city of Philadelphia. And he delivered a major address, again, on July the 4th. And the subject was called Independence Day. And
I remember
it's also a great message I would encourage for the listeners to watch that July 4th message, as well as this July 4th message. But in that July 4th message, the minister talked about, Brother Shahid, how the framers of the Constitution, even though they were slaveholders, they put together a document that we see as divinely inspired, particularly because the principle of free speech paves the way for a nation to be able to hear from messengers and prophets of God when they appear, such that they could speak the word of God that would warn and guide the nation if it gets off course. But the minister also said that freedom of speech is important in a nation because it keeps rebellion and insurrection from developing. So in America, we have not had any rebellions or insurrections against the government because this is a society where you can, quote unquote, criticize the king. You can't criticize the monarchies in many nations around the earth. You can't criticize the prime ministers in many nations around the earth.
That's right.
And so these are societies that frequently have the violent overthrow of government. because they have heavy censorship. There is no freedom of expression. Well, America is becoming more like the corrupt monarchies throughout the earth as it begins to censor voices that it does not like. And this is, again, problematic because if you allow even those voices to speak and express themselves that you don't like, then they never feel the need to go underground and foment rebellion against the constitutional authorities. And so it is a sad state of affairs that we have entered into because these social media platforms, they've ceased to just be social media. In truth, they function like public utilities. You can hardly have or do business in the modern world without having need or use for social media platforms.
That's right.
So to the degree that they are robbing people like Minister Farrakhan and others of their constitutional right of free speech is something that I think all lovers of the First Amendment should close ranks around and begin to challenge in the courts of law.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, brother. And I ran across an article or Mr. Dershowitz's response. It came out on the 8th of July, just 4 days after the minister gave his address. And it's entitled Farrakhan's Threats for Advocating Vaccinations. And it's interesting, brother. I read the article. And the interesting thing about that article to me, brother, was he brought up the same old lies, if you will, the same old canards, the same old tactic of accusing the minister of saying what he did not say. And of course he says, and I'm going to quote the article in part, he says, for anyone who has followed Farrakhan's hate-filled career, praising Hitler, calling Jews termites, calling Judaism a gutter religion, attacking gays, the content of any Farrakhan speech comes as no surprise. So I lived that particular part. He says some other things that led me to believe that there's a turn now to make telling the truth illegal by characterizing it as incitement as opposed to what it actually is, which I think a better word is advocating or advocacy. But at any rate, brother, these same old tired charges, and I'm moving towards this anti-Semitism that they always like to use. If you will review for the listening audience, because I know in Mississippi, brother, where I am, as I talk and have talked to people prior to the COVID-19 crisis happening, these events and these conversations are not really had in the Delta. So I got some of those brothers and sisters from the Delta on. I'm looking at them. Speak to this thing, brother, that they love to accuse the minister of, with praising Hitler, calling Jews termites. That's a recent one. The gutter religion one is a very, very old one, in attacking gays. If you would, please.
Well, Brother Shaheed, we understand that, first of all, I want the black community to understand that all of our great ones, all of them, have had to undergo some kind of conflict at some point in their career with the Jewish leadership. It's important to understand that because that frames now the discussion. Because they want you to believe Minister Farrakhan is an exception. Certainly, to be clear, he is an exceptional human being. However, he is not an exception to the pattern of the Jewish castigation and condemnation of strong black leaders and organizations, especially those that had a black theology, especially those that had a black economic component to their proposed solutions for our people. So when you look at all of those who preceded the minister and who were similarly attacked, then you have to conclude that the minister is in good company.
Mm-hmm.
He's in the good company of Jesus. He's in the good company of Prophet Muhammad. He's in the good company of Marcus Garvey. He's in the good company of Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Dr. King. He's in good company. Over the years, the minister has been misquoted. The minister has been outright lied upon, as is the recent case where DJ Vlad of Vlad TV, he misrepresents Minister Farrakhan's words spoken on July 4th, 2020, as he was interviewing our brother D.L. Euclid, who, mind you, just a year ago offered a very powerful defense of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan when he learned that social media platforms were removing the minister's presence. But let's just go for a minute just to give a kind of a short timeline of events.
Yes, sir.
In 1979, Jesse Jackson met with Yasser Arafat of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So did American UN Ambassador Andrew Young. As a result, Jewish organizations were outraged, and it ultimately ended in Ambassador Young resigning. Once Ambassador Young resigned, I learned that some 200 black leaders united and organized to push back against the Jewish leadership. Basically unheard of. And they said that, we're not going to allow you to dictate to us what our view of foreign policy should be. If we want to talk to the Palestinian leadership, we want to talk to the Israeli leadership, we're free to do that. We're not your slaves.
That's right. At least we shouldn't be.
So fast forward a few years later, Brother Shahid, to 1984. Jesse decides to run for president. And those that remembered what Jesse did in 79, they immediately attacked him. And it got so bad, it went beyond words. And they firebombed several of Jesse's campaign offices.
California.
And he was threatened. Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam came to his defense. The minister assigned brothers of the FOI to be or serve as personal protective detail for Reverend Jackson and his family. And then the minister began to be like a stump speaker, going around on behalf, defending Reverend Jackson before crowds of black audiences and voters. Well, maybe around February 25th of 1984, Minister Farrakhan publicly told the leaders of the Jewish community, as black people, we're not going to sit back and allow you to kill Jesse Jackson.
They bombed the man's office.
We're not going to allow you to do that. And that's why I always say to many of our teenage brothers and sisters, Brother Shahid, if you want to talk about ride or die, the Muslims are the original ride or die.
That's right.
Because in our history, going back to the time of the Prophet, the Muslim community had allies.
That's right.
We had those who were called Ansars. In other words, we entered into treaties and relationships with non-Muslims. And so their friends became our friends, but their enemies became our enemies also.
That is correct.
And so the minister's powerful defense of Reverend Jackson caused on February the 27th, Nathan Perlmutter of the ADL, Nat Hintoff of the Village Voice, to call Minister Farrakhan a black Hitler. And so on March 11th of 1984, Minister Farrakhan examined the term Hitler, examined the history of Hitler as he defended himself in a message delivered at the Final Call building.
Still got that
and
message, brother.
This is where people say he called Hitler great because he referenced the greatness of Adolf Hitler in relationship to Germany. Now, if you go to the Encyclopedia Britannica right now, you'll see that the Encyclopedia Britannica goes much further in lauding the laudatory aspects of Hitler's leadership. And so the minister said, this man was a wicked killer. Don't compare me to him.
That's right.
The only comparison that exists is that he rose his people up from the ashes after world wars I'm rising my people up after the Black Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
But don't compare me to your wicked killers because
That's
I'm a
right.
man of peace.
That's right.
And so these statements from the early 80s, these Jewish organizations have put them out through the press. And they have literally dogged Minister Farrakhan's trail since that period of time. The minister never praised or glorified Hitler.
Absolutely
The
not.
minister never threatened the Jewish community. He only made a statement that black people would retaliate in self-defense if they tried to kill Reverend Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the root of the controversy. And it's just followed up to this day because after that, Brother Shaheed, certain members of the nation were inspired to begin to research
Mm-hmm.
the history of the black-Jewish relationship. And
Come on,
ultimately, they published The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And as the old saying goes, it was gone after that.
Yes, sir.
So, since that time,
Cat out the bag.
we have been in an entanglement. Not the entanglement that Jada Pinkett Smith was involved in with August Alsina.
Right.
But we've been in a spiritual, political, and economic entanglement with certain Jewish organizations who really like to proclaim that they are the leaders of the Jews, but they really are not. There are many in the Jewish community who like Minister Farrakhan, who believe in Minister Farrakhan. Others admire his strong stance. Rabbi Bruce Kahn comes to mind. He wrote about his experience at the Million Man March, which is fascinating because as a white man and a Jewish rabbi at the Million Man March, you would have expected him to have a very hard time if you believe Minister Farrakhan is an anti-Semite.
Right.
But he wrote of the Million Man March and his experience there in glowing terms, saying he was among a sea of principled black men, and he felt the love and the brotherhood. Now, how is it that Farrakhan is an anti-Semite, and he got the largest audience he ever had? In fact, the largest audience of any speaker that ever had. And yet the men leave from Farrakhan's message, and instead of harming anyone, they literally go as a Salvation Army back to their various cities and locales. They became registered voters. They joined churches. They joined the NAACP. They adopted black children. Crime went down. And Mr. Clinton tried to take credit for it so he could get reelected. But, you know, I don't want to go too far, but that's just some of the historical context.
Yes, sir.
That really gets lost in the back and forth of them labeling our beloved minister as an anti-Semite.
And brother, I asked that, and I'm glad, thank you so much, because see, there's this misperception that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is attacking the Jews.
No, sir.
When the actual opposite is what has been happening. And they are very artful at playing victim, as though they're being victimized by this vehement anti-Semite in the Honorable Minister, when the exact opposite. And for Mr. Dershowitz to recently characterize the minister's words as threats, especially in the light of the fact, and there's a caveat of history, brother, I don't think you mentioned it, but when the Honorable Louis Farrakhan was speaking in California back in the 80s, they were outside chanting, "Who do you want? Farrakhan. How do you want him? Dead." That was Power at Last Forever, Madison Square Garden, 1985. So the Honorable Louis Farrakhan has never called for such an action. And you cannot draw a line between his lectures and the behavior of any member of the Nation of Islam towards any member of the Jewish community or the white community wherein we have committed an act of violence against any of them. So, brother, thank you so much for that. And we're going to move to this next piece, brother, which is, I think it segues in well, this selective targeting with the charge of anti-Semitism. Because I remember a while back, some I think it was around 2018, a year before last, I was reading one of your writings, and you mentioned those who have said positive things about Hitler, but they were not called on the carpet in terms of being anti-Semites. So, brother, could you share that? I'm sure you remember it, brother. I hope you do. If not, I have it here written. I wrote it down. So, if you would. Yes, sir.
President John F. Kennedy, Arthur William Shirer, Encyclopedia Britannica. You even had many authors who write about history from a dispassionate point of view, acknowledge that someone can be great in terms of significance, great in terms of impact, but be morally reprehensible. And this is the case of Adolf Hitler. I wanted to add something that I forgot to add in the other question.
Yes, sir.
But I think it's important. You know, and that is, Brother Shahid, this kind of should be obvious, but I think that we in the black community have kind of forgotten, and that is that as an oppressed people, as a people who were enslaved, the leaders who rise from amongst us to challenge the oppressor should not be expected to be loved and approved of by the oppressors whom they are fighting against.
That's right.
And I know that seems, you know, as Sherlock Holmes would say, elementary, my dear Watson. But I think it's worth emphasizing, because why would we in the black community expect any true leader from our community to be loved and approved of by the white power structure whom they are fighting against?
So
he
elementary.
Wouldn't even be needed. She wouldn't even be needed as a leader had we been treated fairly and had we been treated with love, respect, and kindness. Yet you find those amongst us who feel the need to apologize for statements that a man whom God has anointed to be a liberator for us has said. Why should those who are oppressed care about the feelings of the oppressor? It makes no sense.
None.
There is a natural adversarial relationship that exists between the slave master and the man whose purpose it is to liberate the enslaved. Again, Pharaoh never loved Moses and Aaron. Herod never loved Jesus.
That's right.
Why? Because there's a natural adversarial relationship. Strong black leadership can't be the friend of strong white leadership. Not in an America where there is a perpetual master-slave relationship that persists throughout American institutions.
Come on, man.
So really, we should stop it.
Yes.
Stop acting like our leaders have to be approved of from those outside of our community. Those outside of our community have proven they don't give a damn what black people think about who their leaders are.
That's right.
If they agree that this man from among their people is a worthy spokesperson for them, is a worthy leader for them, what do they look like caring what black people think about it?
That's right.
What do the Israelis think look like caring what the Palestinians think about whom they elect as president?
That's
they
right.
understand there's a natural adversarial relationship. So I just wanted to point that out. Stop feeling like Minister Farrakhan's message should be comfortable in the ears of those that have brutalized us and oppressed us and continue to this day to work wickedly wise plans of genocide against the black community.
That's right.
Don't make no sense.
You made me think, brother.
And it's not self-respect.
That's
it's not
right.
a dignified posture.
Come on, man. I hear and feel your passion, brother. Let it out. Because, I mean, I have the same sentiment, because you made me think of the Sephardic chief rabbi in Israel who had an audience was given to by the current president and some of his administration. And he referred to black people as monkeys. I think his name was Yitzhak Yosef or something like that. He called us monkeys and said that he was quoting the Jewish Talmud. So I hadn't heard a group of black people calling for the repudiation of this Jewish rabbi. But yet we are expected, to consider their feelings where they never consider ours. We don't even consider our own feelings, unfortunately. But
Brother Shaheed, you know, I just thinking about an analogy that you will appreciate. And that is, you know, imagine the police officer that the Legion of Criminals approves of. That don't make no sense.
don't make
You know, they come together and they say, well, we approve of these officers, but we don't approve of them. You know, the man that's involved in crime, he don't want to see no police officer.
No.
As nice and as respectful as you may be, he don't want to see you coming.
No,
because
sir.
there's
Not
a
while he's doing what he's doing.
adversarial relationship.
That's right.
If not, we play as boys, cops, and robbers.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So there's certain natural adversarial relationship, but it could be, Brother Shaheed, that many of us don't believe we're oppressed anymore. We may be under the illusion of inclusion.
Wow.
That integration now has leveled the playing field.
Yes, sir.
But last time I checked, you didn't have any Breonna Taylors in the white community or the Jewish community.
No, sir.
A young sister who was a lifesaver as a paramedic that is gunned down in her own home for no reason. And see, that takes me back to what is organically being identified just through people on social media, Brother Shaheed. I saw several tweets where people who, you know, they're not in the nation and they're not, you know, part of Jewish organizations. And they just said, you know, things like, well, how is it that these organizations could cause Nick Cannon to lose his job for words?
For telling the truth.
They could use
no less
their influence to get the killers of Breonna Taylor arrested. See, so people are awakening kind of organically. You know, there's a phrase that, you know, circulates called the wisdom of the crowd. And so I'm beginning to see the general public who are standing on the sidelines as observers and spectators of what's going on. And they're coming to conclusions that are based in truth. Because to my knowledge, now I could be wrong, but I haven't seen any advocacy on the part of the ADL, the Wiesenthal Center, or the Southern Poverty Law Center.
None.
To help Black Lives Matter, to help convict cops that kill black people, to help end the wealth gap in the black community and the white community. They only show up to condemn our leadership. And we are tired of that as a people. And we're no longer going to sit by quietly and allow them to do that.
Correct. Brother, thank you. And it reminded me what you said, this illusion. You know, I often tell in conversation, I would use this. America has become for black people a very large 2,000 by 3,000 mile fish tank that has been carefully and meticulously decorated to give the illusion of a free society. So the fish never make a break to get out of the tank. And I think that's what we suffer from. It's just a very, very big fish tank. And as long as you have what you need, as long as somebody that's up top peppering the top with food and the necessities and the creature comforts of a nice car and a few $1 million, when you try to swim out of that tank, you find out quickly that that illusion is in fact an illusion. So, brother, look, man, we're at the 21-minute, well, we got about 9 minutes left, and I want to close with a question. I want to get your thoughts on this seventh point, brother, and I'll just drop it out. What would you see as being the best course of action for some of our celebrities to take when confronted with what we now know as the Farrakhan litmus test? You know, the Holy Quran says, when an unrighteous man brings you news, look carefully into it. So, and the look carefully into it says to me that you have to have some information sources that you can vet this thing, this news that you've brought. So what would be your thoughts on that in terms of a course of action that our celebrities should take when confronted with this litmus test?
The first thing I would say, Brother Shaheed, is that, you know, in 2010, when our beloved minister published The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 2. He sent a letter around to black leaders and persons of influence that they should stand down. In other words, don't interfere. Don't rush to be apologists. Don't become repudiators, because this is a battle now between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And so that's the first thing that I would remind us of, is that Minister Farrakhan never asked Nick Cannon to be a spokesperson or representative for him.
That's correct.
Minister Farrakhan has never asked any of these brothers and sisters who have a high profile to say anything on his behalf. Fact about it, if you know Minister Farrakhan, you know Minister Farrakhan is very protective of these brothers and sisters.
Very.
Because he knows what happened to them if they become too forward or too public in their association with him. So again, a man walking in the footsteps of Jesus, he understands that, there have to be some people who are like Nicodemus, who have to have a private relationship with him. Secondly, I would say, avail yourself of the research that the minister's bold message is supported by. And that's one of the greatest calumnies or casualties in this controversy, Brother Shaheen.
Yes, sir.
Is that because the minister has been labeled an anti-Semite, that pejorative designation causes many men and women not to go beyond that to see, well, what is Farrakhan actually saying? What are his arguments? Is he being lied on, or are they telling the truth about him? And I relate it to this. If they come and tell you or I, as self-respecting black men,
yes, sir,
and this is David Duke, and he's KKK. Well, now for most of us in the black community, that shuts down the conversation. I don't want to read his literature. I don't want to listen to his speeches. I don't want to find out, well, are they lying on David Duke? I don't want to really see, well, what supports his arguments against us as people? Because the label KKK is so deleterious to any and all things black that if you tell me this person or that person is KKK, okay, let me shun them, let me distance myself from them. So what gets lost is the fact that everything Minister Farrakhan is saying as a minister, as a prophetic voice, as a man following in the footsteps of Jesus, it's supported by a boatload, a massive amount of empirical facts, historical information, scriptures, you name it. There is support for the boldness that we see in the minister, but that the content of that never makes it or never sees the light of day because of the labeling. So I'm hopeful that as time goes on, we can begin to strengthen our supporters in prominent positions with information.
That's right.
Not for them to go out and be on the stump speaking and preaching it.
Right.
But that they would know that their brother, whom they love, is not wrong. That even though they may not be able to say what he says, what he is saying is in fact the truth. And the last thing I would say is that our entertainers and celebrities should seek an audience with the minister if they find themselves in a situation where they are being pressured. Seek an audience with the minister.
Seek counsel, man.
And get counsel from the minister. Because again, don't start squirming when strong black leadership is hated by the white power structure. That's a natural adversarial relationship.
That's correct.
If there's a man that claims to be the liberator of the enslaved, but the enslavers love him and approve of him.
That's odd.
And that's the signal. He's not really a liberator of the enslaved.
That's correct.
So seek an audience with your brother before you say anything. And just learn to say no comment. That's a powerful 2 words. If Lad asks you, well, what do you think about what Farrakhan said? If you don't know what Farrakhan said, first of all, just say no comment. Next question, please.
That's correct.
See, when you are being interviewed, you don't have to answer every question a person asks you. If you're not prepared to answer it, don't respond. Move on to the next question.
Wow.
Because I would maintain that in the case of DJ Vlad and D.L. Hughley, he was given the assignment to secure from D.L. Hughley what his cohorts could not secure from Nick Cannon. See, it's important for them to be able to say, see, Farrakhan's own people repudiate him. That's very important for them. So
very.
Over and
especially
over
high-profile ones.
Nick could say, I'm going to give y'all money. Nick could say, I apologize for what I said. Nick could say, I want to be educated by Jewish leaders. Nick could write a joint letter with Jonathan Greenblatt, which he did. But guess what? Until he repudiates Farrakhan,
they will not be happy.
Those on the other side will not be satisfied.
That's correct.
Because even though they made that thing about Professor Griff, the real issue was that a man who has $1 billion, I had to confess, Brother Shaheen, I've watched Wilding Out maybe once or twice over the years. I had no idea it was worth and has generated over $1 billion in revenue. So this is a young man that has done well for himself in a very difficult town.
Yes, sir.
And so they hate the fact that that kind of man, with that kind of wealth, with that kind of influence, with that kind of ability to be successful, might come over to Farrakhan and say, Minister, what y'all need me to help y'all do? Do you need money?
Yes, sir.
Do you need knowledge? Do you need me to make some phone calls? Do you need me to open some doors? Do you need me to have my people sit with your people? Because they always want to keep revolutionary and strong black leadership bereft of resources so that the revolutionary idea remains a wonderful sounding idea on a piece of paper, on the back of a newspaper, on a placard, as part of a speech.
That's right.
But if you marry money with wisdom, or money with divine wisdom, you then have the power to change the reality of suffering of black life in America, and that they fear more than anything.
Wow. My brother, man, we're at 6:30, man. We're right on time. I certainly appreciate and thank you for coming on. To my listening audience and watching audience, thank all of you for tuning in to today's relaunch of the SOS Saving Ourselves live stream now from our believing community out of Holly Springs, Mississippi, the great state, as my brother student minister Abram would say, down there in Jackson, Mississippi, the great state of Mississippi. Brothers and sisters, we certainly thank you all for tuning in, and we leave you as we came before you. And hold on, let me see. I got an outro, brother. I'm trying to make this thing. You know how we try to do, man. We try to do things.
Let me say this real quick, Brother Shaheen.
Go right ahead.
Please, just encourage everybody that's watching. Go to researchminister.com.
Oh, yes.
You can see our latest books and writings. Check us out. Support our work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, dear family, for tuning in. And as always, we leave you as we came before you with the greeting words of peace. And I can't seem to find what I'm looking for so I can play it. So we're not going to worry about it. Thank you all for tuning in, dear family. Assalamu alaikum, or peace be unto you.